So this is an introduction to mapping. So we've done 2 steps so far, right? We've done scenario planning, and we analyzed our requirements, and we have a whole list of business objects here. Now our job is to map those over to NIEM. Take each one of those, find out what they represent in NIEM, and at the end of the mapping process, we'll have all these business requirements in a NIEM format, and then we can move on to the other steps. Now hold tight, this is a long, long section because we're going to be learning every single thing about NIEM that we can in the context of doing this mapping. So this is a big step. This is much longer than the previous 2 steps. So hang tight, but we'll work our way through it piece by piece. All right, so now we're to the 3rd step. We've done scenario planning. We've talked a little bit about that, about just getting your ducks in a row. We talked about analyzing requirements, and we've seen a UML diagram representing what we're going to use for the rest of the training as our sample message spec, as our sample exchange to use. And we learned a little about XML and XML schema, just enough to be dangerous, just enough to be able to understand the NIEM things that we're going to see as we go, as we see the NIEM versions of the NIEM versions of different objects as represented in XML schema. So now that we know all that, we can start getting into the actual mapping and modeling process. We can start actually looking at our business objects and what they become in NIEM. So that means talking mapping and modeling, and that means talking about spreadsheets. So for this entire section, and this is a long section, so buckle in. We're about to start the hard stuff. Up till now, it's been introduction, and when I say easy steps, I don't mean easy to do, because actually figuring out requirements is not easy to do, but easy to talk about and easy to show you. Now we're getting to the more difficult stuff, where we're going to get technical. We're going to look at NIEM details. We're going to have a mapping spreadsheet. We're going to see schemas, and we're going to use some tools to help us discover things in NIEM. So that's going to be a little harder. So first we're going to talk about an introduction to mapping, the concepts, how it works, and what your choices are. We're going to look at some templates. We're going to look at the basic idea, and then we're going to get into actually building the exchange, building the mapping, going from the business objects to the NIEM objects. You can actually start doing it. So we'll start with an introduction. We're going to talk about what your options are when making a mapping spreadsheet, because you have a few. Then we're going to talk about actually documenting the business objects, which is really simple. You just dump the classes into the spreadsheet is what you do. And then we're going to start mapping. We're going to map existing stuff. We're going to map new stuff. Mapping is going to take a while, and the whole time we're going to keep an ongoing sample instance skeleton, that text file I showed you earlier, so we can see what we've added in each step and see the structure as it builds. When it comes to what you want to use to map, well, basically use a spreadsheet. The idea is to provide a list of business objects and what NIEM things they map to. And the best way people have found is just to do that in a plain old spreadsheet. List your business objects on the left, list what they've come in NIEM on the right. And that's just typically what people have done. So the first one I'm going to show you 3 different options. And the first is the NIEM mapping template. I think if you search for NIEM mapping template, you get it. I've got my own copy, but you get it on the NIEM.gov site. It is primarily designed for submitting content for inclusion in NIEM. So if you're a domain and you're going to submit new content, you typically do it in the form of filling in this mapping template. So because of that, it's a fairly complex beast. It has 8 different tabs. There's a lot of stuff to potentially fill in. That is the way that people actually submit new content to the NIEM. But you can also use it for mapping in a message spec, and you really just use a few of the tabs if you're going to do it that way. I think this mapping spreadsheet is a little bit overkill for a message spec, although I do know people who use it, and you are welcome to use it as well. The other reason to use this spec is there's a tool available called MEP Builder, and while MEP Builder is still under development, I mean it's done with phase 1, but it has a phase 2 and a phase 3 to go. But it's usable right now, and if you want to use it, well, you got to use this template. This is the one to use. Let's take a look at it, and here's what the template looks like. So you'll see there's a number of tabs at the bottom, a number of different tabs. There's a tab that's a README tab, and that's what we're looking at right now. And it just it tells you about the template, things like that. There's a description of every single field in the template. So anytime you want to, on any of the tabs, you want to know what they mean, you can come here and get definitions for them. There is a tab for information about submitting content, where you could put information about your message spec as well. One of the ones you'd use the most would be the property tab. And so in the blue columns is where you would put your UML stuff. So here's where I would put person and person name and person first name, things like that. And then on the right side in the red is where I would put what that became a NIEM. So the red side would be the NIEM elements that I'm mapping the things on the blue side to. And I would just keep them here in the spreadsheet. There's a mapping code in the middle, and the mapping code is about saying if it's a really good match or not, things like that. So this is good, and you can use this for message specs. If you want to map a type specifically, you would do that on the type tab. If you want to say a type has certain things, so you want to say here's a type like the person name type, and it contains the first, middle, and last name, that's where you would define that as here on the type has property tab. If you're making new code tables, and we're going to talk about code tables, but you would list them here. If you had namespace information, we'll talk about namespaces, they'd be here. And there's finally a local terminology tab. NIEM supports the use of local terminology. It's really a NIEM thing. It's not something, it's a NIEM domain thing. It's not something that you would use in your message specification. So we don't cover it in the training, but NIEM has, each NIEM scheme at the top has a set of acronyms and what they mean. And that's the local terminology stuff. Again, this spreadsheet is primarily for submitting content to NIEM itself. But using the property tab and the type tab and the type has property tab, you can utilize this to also define your message specification. But I find it a little bit overkill for me, so I don't use it. Another option is the simple training spreadsheet, and this is what we used to use in training. It's got a constraint. It had to fit on a slide, and that's true. That actually was a constraint, but it's very simple. It just has your business objects on the left, a mapping column in the middle for how good a map it was, and then the NIEM stuff, just the basics of NIEM on the right. Now you don't know much about NIEM yet, but it's got just the basics, elements, types, an element path to show how things fit together, and an element definition. And then finally, but it's very simple. Typically what I would do is I would start with this, and then I would add columns to get me what I wanted, to get a custom one that works for me. And that takes us to Tom's custom mapping spreadsheet. Now let me be clear. This is just my mapping spreadsheet. This is just mine, and you can make your own. There's no required spreadsheet format. You can look at this interesting bullet here. You can make your own custom mapping spreadsheet, and that's perfectly fine. There is a specification about what goes in an IEPD. And while it says you need to have something that shows the mapping, it does not say what form that has to take. That is by design, because I was there when we wrote that section of the spec. That's by design. We said, do we want to have a set mapping spreadsheet that people should use? And we all decided no. People should be able to make the mapping spreadsheet that meets their needs. So that's what I did. I made mine, and since I'm doing the training, you're going to see my mapping spreadsheet. But there is nothing special about my mapping spreadsheet. It's the training map sheet mapping one with some stuff added, some of which you probably want to have in yours, some of which you probably don't. Everybody has their own custom mapping spreadsheet, and that's perfectly fine. Mine's evolved over time. It has all the stuff I need to be able to make schemas. So when I get done mapping and I got a mapping spreadsheet, everything I need to know, I don't have to go back and refer to any other notes. I have everything I need right there in that spreadsheet ready to go. That said, it's not as overwhelming as the NIEM mapping template. It's only got one tab. It's got a lot of columns, but it's only got one tab. It's a straight shot linear type of thing. I think that makes it a little easier to use. It works with something called the NIEM linter, which is a tool I wrote to take my mapping spreadsheet and clean it up for me and do some of the grunt work and make it all nice and clean, and then optionally generate some documents off of it. That's a work in progress, but it does kind of work, and we're going to see a demo of that later. But for me, I use my mapping spreadsheet because it works with my tools. And if you want to use my tools, then you want to use my mapping spreadsheet. But you don't have to. You don't have to at all. And if you want to use the MEP Builder, which is an official NIEM Program Management Office tool, then you want to use the mapping template because that's what that tool uses. So it's all up to you. We're going to follow my format because I think it's simpler and I think it works better in a training context. I just think it's better for message spec definitions, but any of these are really good things, really good ones to use. So let's take a look at mine and we can see what it looks like. So here's my mapping spreadsheet, and it's just one tab. There's only one tab in it. It starts out like all the mapping spreadsheets on the left with the UML stuff. So I've got a column for the class. That's the name of the box. Remember, we had a class driver info box, we had a person box, we had a driver box, we had an injured person box, and so on and so forth. Then there's a column for the attributes, organized by the box they're in. Now in UML, I didn't talk about this a lot because I didn't want to get too deep into UML, but the boxes are called classes. The things inside the boxes are attributes, and those are supposed to be simple data types. Those are just simple things, strings, dates, numbers, true, false values, things like that. And so those are all listed here. And if you go back to the UML, you'll see these all match right up. There's a person box, and it's got a person date and a first and a last name in it, so they match up. I added definitions, which I just made up. And you would get these definitions from their subject matter experts who were there in the room when you did the business requirements. So that's where they would come from. I just made them up. So they're just really quick descriptions. They're just quick definitions. They're just, it's a demo. It's an example message spec, so I just use example definitions. I use a column for data type to tell me whether these are classes or strings. Down here, the severity code is a code table, so I put code there. The through the window indicator, that's a Boolean, so I put Boolean there. And the same down, most of them are strings or else they're classes, they hold other things. There's a cardinality column. I think it's important to mark down the cardinality out of the UML diagram. Now, I didn't actually put cardinality in that UML diagram because it tends to clutter it up, and I want it clean so we can use it as a guide. But there's some cardinality there. We just have one person object in the exchange, the driver. That may seem a little weird because we have the injured person, but this is a crash driver info exchange. It's about the crash driver. So it centers around the crash driver, and it's just the one person, the crash driver. There are ways we could add additional injured people if we want. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But you'll see things like, hey, here's the cardinality from my name example. First name is 1 to 1. Last name is 1 to 1, but middle name is 0 to many, 0 to star. The date, though, hey, there's only one date. The crash can only have occurred on one date, so there's one date there. So things like that. That cardinality goes all the way down, put it for all of them. Now everything else is blank because we're just starting. So I put all the UML stuff in there, and now this is all stuff that we'll fill in as we go through the training. There is the property name. This is the name of the element, and these will be, for the most part, right out of NIEM. These will be NIEM element names. And as we fill it in, you'll see more and more NIEM element names. But we can also create new things. That's an advanced topic for later in the training. We'll get to it, and then some of these names will be our own names. Everything's got a type. We saw that in the XML schema. Some things are complex beasties that have other things inside of them. Other things just hold things like strings or dates. Potentially there's a base type. If I'm going to make something new, I might be making a new type for it, and that new type will be based on something existing. Remember the open-ended arrows in the UML that showed specializations? That had a driver, which was a special kind of person. And so in that case, you'd have a driver type, which would be a special kind of person type. So that will get filled in specifically for when I make new things. Again, this tells me what I need to do later in my schema. Then we have two oddball columns. And if you're going to use this spreadsheet, you may not be using these columns. If you want to use my linter tool, though, then you probably do. But they're kind of a pain to maintain, but for me, they pay off in the end. So these are really optional. These are optional. If you want to do things exactly like me, you want these columns. If you don't, you don't. Basically, they say for any element, what does that go inside of? And it's kind of a backwards description of the structure, and then I can use that information to build some stuff. Totally optional, though. I have a category column, and my category column is all about, is this an element? Is this a reference to an element? Is this a code table? Is this external from an external standard? We'll see more about this as we go and it gets filled in. It'll make more sense. I don't usually fill it in unless I have to. I need to know that something is a something, and so that's for that. I put the definitions here, so the definitions go in this column. I put cardinality here, so I'll just do 1 to many, 1 to 1, 0 to 1, whatever matches the cardinality on the UML. But remember that simple UML got very complex when we moved to NIEM. So we'll end up adding additional lines to this to reflect some of that, and we'll have to add cardinality for those as well. You might have sample data, and you might not want this column, but maybe you do. Maybe you want to put some sample data in. Maybe if I have a small code table, which I will, I want to put the things it can have. There is going to be a code table. It's only going to have 2 things in it, 2 codes. So I put the codes in the sample data so they're there in the spreadsheet. Somebody doesn't have to go to the schemas in order to see those. Got a column for comments. I use this instead of a mapping column because I don't like having a set number of codes. If I have a problem with mapping, if something's problematic, I'll just put it here in the comments, and that'll be the place where I document that. And then finally, the exchange path. And the exchange path is the path into the actual instance document where an element will live. The training spreadsheet has a similar column. This is both valuable information and a royal pain to update and maintain, and even just to fill in. So I have tools to help me with that, but you'll see as you go, there is a commitment to filling in the exchange path. The component mapping template doesn't have an exchange path, but it's fairly common for IEPDs, for message specs, to have this column in their mapping spreadsheet. It helps show the structure of the instance document and how things will fit together. Now, this will all make more sense as we start to fill it in. It's all blank right now, but we will see as we go, these things will get filled in, and by the end of the training, we'll have filled in mappings for every single thing on the left, and then we can go from that to making schemas. So we talked a little bit about why person is one-to-one. It's because it's about the crash driver, not the crash itself. In a different context, we could have this be different. Because there's only one person, we could simplify some of the things we're going to do in this training, but it would leave us with very little to do in class then, and no way to exercise certain features of NIEM. So there's a little bit of extra complexity added, just so we can show you some things. Or we could have a different context and be about the crash itself, and then it would have multiple person objects, but that would be an entirely different ball of wax and would probably be too complex for the training. So we're going to use my mapping spreadsheet, but again, I can't stress enough, you have options. You can do an ultra simple spreadsheet. You can use the NIEM mapping template, and if you want to use Met Builder, this is a template you want to use. You've got that option. So keep in mind you've got different options. Just because we're using mine doesn't mean mine's the best, doesn't mean mine's the one that's appropriate for your needs. One of the other ones might be more appropriate for your needs, and so you're going to want to think about that and see which one you want to use. I always advocate trying them all. Don't take my word for what's best. Number one, I'm not going to tell you what's best because I don't think there is one best answer on any of this stuff, on any of the tools, on any of the mapping spreadsheets, on any of the techniques. There is no one true way. Everybody has what works best for them. And all I can show you is what works best for me, but that's what works best for me. And you're in a different boat. I've been doing this for 15 years. You're in a different boat than I am. One of the other options might be the right option for you. So that gets us to the basics of searching for NIEM, and we get to start to look at search tools that are out there. So we have a number of different ways to learn about NIEM. The first way, and the way you really should start, the granddaddy of tools, is the SSGT. Now that stands for Schema Subset Generation Tool. This is a NIEM Management Office supported, funded, official tool. This is the tool for learning about NIEM. I like to say it's the canonical version of NIEM because the actual NIEM schemas that you download are generated by the SSGT. The SSGT almost can't be wrong because if the SSGT is wrong, the schemas that come out of it will be wrong, and the schemas are the definition of NIEM, so they're not wrong. So the SSGT is really the place to start. It's the big granddaddy tool. It's the one to go to for most searching. Let's take a look at how to search for some things in the SSGT. Now the first thing to tell you is there is a sidebar here that says Schema Subset. You'll see it right here. We aren't going to use that until we get all the way done with the mapping. So Schema Subsets, totally different topic. We'll get to it, but it's going to be a while. But it's going to be here. You can hide it. You can hide the sidebar and get more screen real estate, but it tends to come back. So it'll come back later when I open a new window. Just know it's there. Don't worry about it. It'll come back, but that's for showing the subset. I'm going to put it back because typically this is what you're going to see. Oops. Now to search for it, very simple. You just you put search terms over here. It's a search. So if I want to know about person middle name. I put person middle there. Do a search. Oops, click too hard though. And I get some results. I get a person middle name, and I get a person name initials text. Why did that match person middle? Well, if I hover over these, I'll get definitions. And this says first letter of a person given, possibly middle and last names. Okay, so that's it's got the word middle in the definition. And I got person middle name. Cool, that worked really well. What if I do something a little less specific? Let's just search for person. What do we get then? Well, if we search for just person, we're going to get a much longer list. And sometimes it takes a sec to come back. The SSGT is doing a lot of stuff in the background and shipping a lot of data around. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to come back. So I searched for person and I got more stuff. I got person right away. The ordering for results in the SSGT is if an element name matches your term exactly, that'll show up first. So if I had typed person middle name, all one word, that would come up first. If I type person name, that matches exactly person name. That'll come up first. If I type person space name, that doesn't match exactly. It'll still pull that up, but it won't be first. If it matches exactly, that's what shows up first. And then everything else it matches shows up, and it shows up alphabetically in terms of first the namespace. Now I know we haven't talked about namespaces yet. We will. Right now though, it's just a little prefix telling you what domain things come out of. So first it's ordered by namespace, it's ordered by domain. Secondly, it's ordered alphabetically then by the element name. So here is a biome, that is a biometrics domain. And that's the first thing listed alphabetically because it starts with a B. And then there's person physical marking ID, and that shows up in the biome section alphabetically because it comes after person augmentation. You don't know what augmentations are, but you'll learn about it. But we're going to get to those. As I scroll down, you will see that I got lucky that person was there because, hey, there were 1,528 results, 62 pages of results. So you can get a lot of results if you're not doing a lot of search terms. So, try to be smart with your search terms. It's not easy to page through results on the SSGT. Typically, if what you want isn't in the first page, that's a sign that you need to do better with your search terms. Now, how can I do better with my search terms? Well, one way is to use the advanced searching functionality. So SSGT is very sophisticated. I can search for exact phrases. I can search for with at least one of the words. I can have words that get negated, so search for these words, but only ones that have not this. There is a way to search contextual definitions, which we'll learn about the need for that when we get to inheritance. We're not going to cover it now. You can also search just names or just definitions or just keywords or just usage or just example content. You can clear these and say, I just want to search names, and that'll get me fewer results, which I might want. I might want narrowed results. I can also search within domains. So I can clear these and say, I only want to search for maritime stuff. And so that would constrain my search to just maritime stuff. So you have a lot of ability in the advanced searching to exactly search for the things you want. Now there is a caveat, or at least a warning, something to be aware of. If I hide this, it's still in effect. So this is and it carries over from page to page. So it's very easy to go into advanced, do some constraining in the advanced options, and then later not get the things you want, not realizing that the stuff is all still in effect. Okay? The choices I've made here, if I search for stuff now, I'm only going to get things where the terms match in the names and are in the maritime domain. So when you're done using advanced, always make sure you restore the checkboxes so that that doesn't happen. Now what I love about the SSGT as an exploration tool is it's very, very good at understanding the structure of things, understanding how things are put together. And it's good at that because it allows you to look at the structure right here from the search results. So if I want to know more about a person, I just click on the little plus sign and it opens up person, and I can see the things that a person contains. So it contains a birth date, that might be important later. all sorts of things. Oops, circumcision indicator, that might be important later. That'd be something you'd use schematron though to do some checking. You've got how many dependents they have. You have a description of them. You have a digital image of them. You've got eye color stuff down here. You've got facial hair down here. You've got stuff, category of hair. You've got color of hair. If we get on far enough, we'll get to name. These tend to be alphabetical. Here's name. And now what's great is if I want to know what goes inside of a person name, I can open it from right here. So I can keep drilling down. Oh, person name has an effective date, a full name, a given name, a maiden name, a middle name, and some things you don't know about, like an augmentation point, a category. It's got salutations and suffixes. That's cool. And you can just keep opening things. You can open things to your heart's content to learn more about them. Just right here from the search results. Now you can go into particular pages. So I go to the person page and see similar information. Here's the person. I see its definition up here. I see it's a person type, and I can open that up to see the same information we just looked at in the search page. I can see all the same stuff. I can still scroll down and open up person name if I want and see the things in person name. So I can do it from the page for the element as well, but you don't have to. And that's really powerful for understanding how things are put together. You know, like person medical condition. I want to know more about that. Fine. Hit the plus box. Here's more about it. Oh, medical condition doctor. I want to know more about that. Yeah, it turns out it's a person type. It's going to have person things. Let's open it up and check. Hey, it does. The same things we saw for person. And you can drill down to your heart's content. You can just keep drilling. I've never hit a limit to where it says, no, you can't go any deeper than that. So that's very powerful. You can also search individually for types. So I can search for person type this way and get similar information about their types. Now I didn't match, it didn't say person type, so person type is actually going to be a ways down and actually a few pages down because it takes a bit to get to the NC prefixes. But you can search for types. There's not really a point to searching for namespaces, so we're not going to cover it. We can search through external standards. Again, not a point to it right now really, but facets are interesting. Facets are code table entries. So if I'm looking for a code table, and we haven't talked about how NIEM does code tables, but NIEM has code tables. If I want to look for eye color, you know, I can search for eye color, sure, but if I want to be fancy, I can just search for blue and find out which code tables include the word blue as one of the codes. And we will get registration plate colors. Hair color has got blue as a code. Conveyance, you've got that. Barcode is got somewhere in here. Yep, it's in the definition. Tribe kind, there's a Blue Lake Rancheria of California. Blue Earth County, I like Blue Earth County because that's Blue Earth is the name of a Jayhawks album, and I'm a big Jayhawks fan because I'm from Minnesota, and so are the Jayhawks, and there is a Blue Earth, Minnesota. And it is named for the clay there in Blue Earth, which is of a blue tinge. So Blue Earth, Minnesota is actually named after the color of the earth there. But if we go down enough, we go, oh, here's our eye color right here. Blue is one of the choices. So that can be really handy when you don't know really what a code table is called, but you have an idea of the kind of codes that would be in it. So a lot of searching you can do. We'll talk about associations when we get to the association topic too. The other thing to know in terms of searching is you can do different releases of NIEM. So you go to the, that's the selected release, you go to options. And there I can change my release. And you can see here are all the releases of NIEM. They're all still supported in the SSGT. Again, if you want to do work in NIEM 1.0, you can. I highly recommend against it. I can't highly recommend against it hard enough. But you can do it. You can do NIEM 2 work, 2.1, 3, 3.1, 3.2, 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, 5.1, 5.0, and 5.1. And when NIEM 5.2 comes out, you'll be able to do that as well, whatever version you want. So that quickly is how the SSGT works. We're going to be using it extensively throughout the training to look things up. And it is particularly good at giving you a good idea of how things look organizationally, how things are organized. The other one we can do really quickly is crash, because this is what we're dealing with. But not facets. Got to make sure you change it to the right kind of thing. Did that on purpose so that you would see that. Did not do that on purpose. So here is crash. Here's a crash. What goes in a crash? Well, we can open up and see and learn all the stuff. Hey, there's a crash person. There's a crash vehicle right there. There's a location down here. These are all things we're going to need later. And what's important about being able to eyeball how things fit together is it's very, very important, and I'm going to underscore this a lot as we do mapping. It's very important to understand the NIEM objects as objects, to not look at mapping as a one-to-one element mapping, to not treat NIEM as something that's flat. That's a flat data dictionary that everything is flat and it's just one list. They're not. They're objects that fit together in different ways. And you need to learn the objects. You need to learn how the objects are put together. You just have to. If you're going to do NIEM work, you have to do things like know what a crash is, and know if you're going to use crash in an exchange, you need to understand crash. You need to understand how crash is put together. You need to understand how the things inside crash are put together. If I'm going to use a crash vehicle in a crash, I need to understand how crash vehicle is put together. And SSGT is perfect for that. Now the next tool to show you is Wayfair. Now Wayfair is a tool I wrote long ago. It's actually older than the SSGT, although the SSGT began life as something called the model viewer, and the model viewer is older than Wayfair. But Wayfair is a very old tool, and it actually predates NIEM, as does the SSGT. And it is another search and discovery tool, but it does it in a slightly different way. It just has a different kind of philosophy. It is not as good at showing structure, but it's better at showing everything you want to know about an element. So I can type the same thing. I can go and type for person. And one thing that's nice about Wayfair, this depends on the browser. Different browsers some browsers will give you, your most recent stuff as a pop-up, but they'll also give you this list of terms that match so far. So this is built into Wayfair. As I start typing a NIEM element name, if I'm getting it right, I get a drop down with things that match. So as soon as I get it wrong, I do 3Ds and it goes away. But as long as I'm typing the right one, it'll be there. And if I stop that person, it'll give a whole list. Unfortunately, some browsers, these are recent ones I've done, and it's hiding the list. It just depends on the browser. Every browser has its own way of showing these. It's using a built-in HTML thing called a data list. But Wayfair will give you a list of things that match exactly as you're typing. And the Wayfair doesn't do advanced searching. Wayfair is kind of dumb. SSGT is really smart and does really smart stuff. Wayfair is dumb and doesn't. So you've got names and definitions, or you can search for names only, or you can search for exact matches. However you want to roll. Let's search for something a little more than person, though. Let's search for middle name. Let's put them all there. And we'll search, and we get some results. So in Wayfair, on the left you have elements that match, and on the right you have types that match. You don't have to pick which one you want, you get them both. The trade-off for that is you don't get to search code table entries. Wayfair doesn't do that. Wayfair, you can't search for blue and find out that eye color is one of the tables, but that there's a county table that has Blue Earth, Minnesota. Can't do that in Wayfair. That's SSG only. But Wayfair, you get elements and types both on the same search page. The way Wayfair orders things is by number of search terms that match, and then alphabetically by element name. Wayfair ignores the domain prefix on the front in terms of ordering. So you can see that right here. You've got person middle name and person name initials text. Those both match person, middle, and name. And we saw that in the SSGT. These are the same two things that came up when I searched for person and middle and name in the SSGT. The ordering is different though. SSGT put person name initials first and then person middle name because it orders by prefix. Wayfair just orders by element name, doesn't care about the prefix. Then there's a line, then there's the things that match two of the three terms. So these are all things that match person or middle, person and middle, or person and name, or middle and name. And so there's a bunch of those. Here's person name because it matches both person and name but not middle, so that shows up in this list. And as you go down, then there's another bar, and then there's the things that match one of the terms. And this is a really long list, because there are a lot of things in NIEM that match one of those three words. You can see I've scrolled a few pages, and we're still on the letter A. We just finally got to B down here. So there's a lot. So it's ordered that way to try to put the stuff you most likely wanted up front. Everybody's got their way of trying to order these things. And this is just how Wayfair does it. It's fairly simple, but it's fairly effective. Now, suppose I wanted to go look at, let's go look at person. Let's search for just person. Now, I can search for just person, but I'll get a lot of things. Even if I just search for names, I'll get a lot of things. But if I know the name, and I search for exact match, I'll just get person. I can click on person, and I get a name. I get a page for it. So SSGT gives you the ability to dynamically open elements and see what's inside and see how they're structured. You can do it right from the search page, or you can go to a page for that element. Wayfair instead doesn't show you that overall structure, but instead shows you everything it can about a particular element. So you go to the person page, and Wayfair is going to show you everything it can about that element. So it's going to show you the name of the element, person. It's going to show you the type, person type. And there are similar pages for the type, so I could click on that and get to it. It's going to give you the definition. Then it has 4 quadrants. The first quadrant, the upper left quadrant, this is like the northwest quadrant. It's actually, in the code, it's called the northwest quadrant. This is everything that can contain a person object. So these are all the things that can contain a person. Most of them are associations, but not all. We haven't learned about associations, but we will. But here's a list of all of those. Over on the right is everything a person can contain. Accent text, age description. Hey, this is the same stuff we saw in the SSGT. And indeed it is. There's a couple of things you'll notice that are different. There are things like this replacing stuff. We didn't see that in the SSGT. When we get to the topic of substitution groups, we'll talk about the difference and how the different tools handle that. Again, just different tool philosophies. But you'll see all the same stuff listed. But what you can't do is open any of this stuff up. If I want to find out what person education is made of, I can't see it here. I have to go to the page for person education. I just don't have any other option. That's what I have to do. So if you're looking for, well, let's look at this a little bit. Person education goes inside things of person type, gives you an example, official, activity official, cool. And here's the things it can contain. Now, I like to call this below the fold. There's 2 quadrants down here, which aren't going to make a lot of sense to us yet because we haven't talked about inheritance, but we will. And when we talk about inheritance, then we'll look at these. We can also go and look at, let's do something like crash. Let's go look up crash. And you saw it before the recent pop-up popped up, the name pop-up said, hey, this is one of the names. So I'm going to do an exact match to get to it. Go to crash. If I want to look at the type information, I can look at that and see the stuff about crash type. And crash type is about derivation. Instead of what can contain what, that's all on the element page for Wayfair. In the type stuff, you learn type derivation. So you find out a crash type is derived from driving incident type, which is derived from incident type, which is derived from activity type. Implications of that you will find out when we talk about inheritance, which is the 3rd major mapping topic. So we're going to be getting to it fairly soon. So that is another way to learn about NIEM. But wait, there's more. You can also download the schemas. So if you have a good XML editor and you want to download the schemas, you can do that. You just go here, hey, I want NIEM 5.1, click on it. It'll bring you to this page about it. And it will have here, download the full release as a zip file, and that'll download. And if I go to Finder, so here downloaded it, NIEM release NIEM-5.2, says 0.1 because I've downloaded this before. I did training just last week, downloaded it for them. So this is the 2nd version, but I open it up. There's a README file. There's a distribution file as to how this can be distributed, in this case public. We can look at that. Hey, approved for public release. There are other distribution levels for Department of Defense stuff. But the schemas are all in this XSD folder. There's one for core, and there's one for each domain. So here are all the domains. They have all got their own schemas. There's also a bunch for code tables, and we'll talk more about this when we get to code tables. But if I want to learn about NIEM by looking at the schemas, I can download the schemas and look at the schemas. I can load them up in an XML tool. Now, I'm not going to do that. Let's pretend for a second that you don't have a good XML tool for looking at these things in.
Because XML tools, good ones, are not cheap. Now, when we get down to actually making schemas, I'll talk about some of the major tools, XML editor tools, but just know that they're a few $100 a pop. The one I use, I think, cost me $400 or $500, and every year or so I have to pay another $100 to keep getting the latest releases. It's not cheap. There's free stuff out there, but if you want industrial strength stuff, it usually costs you money. So what if you want to look at the schemas, but you want to look at something better than Notepad++, which you can use, works fine, but something a little better. Well, I dumped all the schemas to HTML just for that reason, mainly so that I could point to them in training without having to load up an editor all the time. So this is available as well as part of third-party tool suites, and each one of these is the actual NIEM schemas converted to HTML so that it is hyperlinked and it's a little bit color-coded. A real XML editor is better, but if you don't have a real XML editor, this is better than just looking at them in a text editor. So suppose I wanted to look at the human services schema. This is the human services schema. Remember I mentioned that local terminology? Here are all the acronyms and what they mean. HHS has a lot of acronyms. Fun fact, I added almost all of these myself when I was helping with that domain. But then I get down to, hey, here's a complex type. We learned about that. We saw then that little bit about XML schema. It's making a type called abuse, neglect, injury type. It's got a base, and it's based on NIEM Core's injury type. And it has a couple of things in it. It's got a neglect harm age text, and it's got a neglect injury augmentation point. So I can learn about that here. And if I want to know more, I can click on injury type to find more about the base, and it will load that up. But here's injury type. We've switched over to NIEM Core. You actually see it in the tab up here. It's the NIEM Core schema. Here's the injury type, and it tells you about it. What's structure's object type? We're going to learn about that. You see the definition. You see all the things it can contain. Here are the different elements it can contain. There's a whole bunch of them. And so this is a way of looking at the schemas. If you're interested in looking at a schema level, you can do that by either downloading the schemas themselves or by using HyperNIEM, which is just the same schemas, just dumped into HTML. That's really all it is. There are a few other ways to look at things. There is a spreadsheet that comes with the release, I believe. Oops. There's a spreadsheet that represents everything in NIEM. All 13,000 odd elements and types are all in there. We can take a look at it, just really roughly. I mean, here it is, and some people really like this, especially if you want to have it on the go, because this is just a standalone file you download. It's not an online tool. But yeah, you can have all this. You can have all the elements. NIEM Core has a tab. Each of the domains have a tab. So this is another way to look at it. This is also hyperlinked, so I can navigate around by pointing at the different things. So the bottom line here is there are a lot of tools and a lot of different ways to look at what's in NIEM and see how things fit together. In general, if you want to know about the structure and how objects are structured and how they fit together, the SSGT is really the best tool for that. If you want to know all the gory details, and I haven't shown you all the gory details, after we talk about inheritance, you'll see more gory details. If you want all the gory details at one go, Wayfarer is the way to go for there. If you want UML diagrams showing the typing and the classes, Wayfarer is the way to go. If you like XML schema and that really works for you, you want to download the official release, or maybe use HyperNIEM if you don't have a good editor that will do all the highlighting and let you navigate around. And if you are old school and you like spreadsheets, there's a spreadsheet version as well. Just a lot of different ways to look at it. There are also some techniques to keep in mind. So, number one, put search terms in. And we all use Google. We all know how that works. You put in your search terms. Try to make them good ones to get to where you want to go. Remember that the SSGT has advanced stuff as well. So if you've got a more advanced search, you can use the SSGT's advanced searching to do that. Search for synonyms. I didn't find the thing I wanted, so I'm going to search for a synonym for it. Again, you do this all the time in Google, right? I didn't get the word, I'm not using the right word. Let's try a similar word. Search for word roots. This is really valuable, especially when it comes to NIEM, because SSGT and Wayfarer, their searching is very exact textual search. So if you search for the plural of a word and it's not in there in a pluralized form, you're not going to find it. We're going to actually see an example of that later as we get into the mapping, where you search for what you think is the right word and you don't find it, and it's because one of the words was pluralized, and NIEM doesn't have it pluralized. But also words like, officer and official. Those are similar words. If I'm searching for that kind of a thing, just search for OFFI, maybe OFFIC, but leave the endings off. Leave pluralizations off, leave the endings of words off to get more hits if you're not finding what you want. You can also search for containers. Search for something that might hold the thing I'm looking for. So I'm trying to find, where a crash of vehicle is. Well, now that's easy to find, but if I couldn't, I could go look for crash and it'd be inside of there. You can also go the other direction. I can't find something, well, look for something that might contain it, right? If I'm looking for a police officer and I can't find it because I don't know, it's like enforcement official in NIEM. I'm searching for police and it's not pulling it up. So what do? Well, what does a police officer have? Well, they have a badge, right? Search for badge. You'll find badge, and badge will be inside of the enforcement official, and that'll get you that direction as well. And we'll see examples of these as we go, because we're actually going to search for these things as we try to map them. I could just tell you what they all map to, but that's no fun. We're going to actually go find them, and we will run into these situations where we need to find things in certain ways.